Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. We are so happy to have so many of you here to talk about a very, very important topic today. I'm going to wait just maybe one more minute, and then we'll kick things off because we have quite a bit to get through today. Much appreciated and very exciting to be having this conversation in the midst of a busy time of year as well. I think it goes to show just how top of mind product carbon footprinting at scale is for frankly the industry at large, but specifically the food industry. So we are very excited to bring a group of experts together today to talk about sort of the larger landscape, why this is important to you, and give some really practical and tangible tools and tips for your own organizations. We have here today. We'll look at the current. Oops. We'll look at the current state of product carbon footprints in the market. That will be led by Nama Avnikadosh, who is the director of PACT at WBCSD. We'll then look at a sort of more practical, pragmatic roadmap to scaling, hoping that you can all walk away with some real tangible next steps for your organization and also a sense, an ability to sort of suss out exactly where you are and where you should be going next. From there, we will move to a Q&A with Grant Sprick, who is the VP of Climate and Environment at Ahold Delhaize. He'll speak to what this has looked like for him, especially at such a large organization with so many product carbon footprints to run, and why Ahold Delhaize is choosing to prioritize this. And then lastly, of course, we will open up the room for an audience Q&A. So any questions that you have for any of the three folks I mentioned, as well as Nina De Palma, who's the Chief Product Officer here at HowGood, who can speak to sort of technological implications, challenges, opportunities that we see there, and sort of the larger ecosystem of the players looking at product carbon footprinting across the industry. So feel free to drop any questions in the chat. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Nama to kick us off.
Well, thank you. And good morning for some of you. Good afternoon for the rest. Afternoon for me. Super excited to be here today and talk to this audience on a topic that is top of mind for a lot of companies. And I must say, in every single industry in the world, so not just food and ag. And I will bring this perspective and kind of where this market is going, what are we seeing, what are the gaps still? So very nice to meet you all. My name is Nama Avnikadosh. As said, I'm the director of the Partnership for Carbon Transparency, incubated in the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And we are all about decarbonizing supply chains under the assumption that in order to do so, we need decision-worthy data to start with. So this is what this is all about. And that is in order to empower companies that are under increasing pressure to decarbonize, focused also on Scope 3 upstream, which is known to be a black box. But even with that massive challenge, still the pressure is on. The pressure is on from external drivers, from internal boards and decision makers. And it's quite of a challenging situation to be, where you need to make business decisions on data you don't trust. So that is quite of a unique situation. And why is it even that we're in that position? Oops, yes. So we see that indeed the world is moving into product level carbon footprint, which is so lovely to say that, to be frank, because I'm in the business only for 3 years, but even within that 3 years, the world has moved. 3 years ago, I was in the business of convincing that product carbon footprint matters, that moving away from corporate level into product level is important, moving away from secondary spend-based data into primary, real specific data of your suppliers matters. So that is no longer the case, which is fantastic. And there's a lot of, let's say, more demand pull coming in. But I would also want to highlight it's not there yet. So even the demand pull is not high enough. So when it comes to regulation, we see product level rules coming up from cross different jurisdictions. The wonderful news we received earlier this year on the collaboration between the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and ISO, where they're going to revisit product level standard as well, which we in PACT super endorse and support. We also see on the market level, from a commercial perspective, companies really taking this level of granularity data to make business decisions, and by that decarbonizing, but also incorporating how sustainability create competitiveness. So this is really happening. Having said that, we don't have it figured out yet, to be very, very clear. So the challenge is real, the pain is big, and that is driven by a few, let's say, forces. The fragmentation of the systems, so too many standards, open for interpretation, not comparable data, is just a mess. So it turns into a huge cost line, a huge headache that companies really find, I would say, even impossible to maneuver. And that even goes beyond that if you look into suppliers and SMEs that don't have the skill set, don't have the capacity, don't have the resources to look into that. What happens, bottom line, is that both buyers and the finance and the markets cannot make decisions. And when we cannot make decisions because we don't trust the data, we freeze. And when we freeze, nothing changes. And that is also due to the fact that there's no neutral infrastructure that exists out there to connect it all and allow companies to trust the data, no matter where they are and no matter what industry they're in. For those who don't know PACT, so the Partnership for Carbon Transparency initiated 5 years ago from in WBCSD for the reason to solve exactly that. How can we create level of trust in our upstream data, move away from this black box so we can make decisions? In order to do so, we have delivered two, let's say, offering or deliverables. The first one is the PACT methodology, which is basically the rules. How do you account for a product carbon footprint? This is industry agnostic, geography agnostic. Think about it as like a decision tree. So there's so many standards out there also for industry specific rules and different geography rules. Me as a client, as a company, what decisions should I make? And then there's no room for interpretation anymore. And when you don't need to create your own decisions on how to apply a standard, this is when numbers become to be comparable. And this is what PACT has done. So this is already version 3 of the methodology has been released earlier this year. This has been done through consultation within our membership, but also with the much broader ecosystem that you will see in a minute. But we did not stop there, because this needs to scale, and quite fast, if I may even add to that. And the only thing that scales data in our world is tech, is digitization. And this is why I'm so excited about this webinar as well. So only when you enable software to support your data calculation and exchange, this is when things become cheaper, easier, faster, and accessible to all. So we went about and created a technical standard. This is basically an API for those that understand this term, where solution providers, softwares like HowGood is embedding within their system and become interoperable with other systems. They join the network, they're conformant with PACT. Think of it as the internet of product carbon footprint. Everyone can choose to use whatever software they want, but as long as they're all on the same network, they can talk to each other. And by that, we're creating a free open market for solution providers to scale, which is fantastic, because then this whole market is growing and we're finding really good value proposition being created in different regions and different industries like this one. And also it makes it accessible for all. And we do this by convening a community, a big community. So this is not a small team. We're 10, by the way. This is not a small team building this. This is a big, big community of organization across different industries, across different geographies that feeding into this, because this is not a theoretical exercise. This is not meant to be a theoretical exercise. This is meant to be applicable for all, to drive business decision with high trust and high confidence. So you can see on the right top side, the solution providers that are conformant with PACT. On the left, the corporates that are enjoying this level of quality of data. So industry-specific initiatives that we collaborate with to make it, again, applicable for all. So it's true to say that specific industries have specific requirements. It's okay, but it's also true to say that there is no one single supply chain that consists of one single industry. That is another truth. So it all needs to be interoperable, and that is exactly why we convene this quite challenging community to make this happen. We listen, and we listen very carefully. And as I said, we don't have it figured out yet. So there's a lot still to be done. And we listen to our stakeholders, whether it's our membership within WBCSD. We have our local and regional partners that realize that when it comes to implementation, and we're in the implementation phase, it must be localized. We must ensure the local system that will enable it. We need to take SMEs and suppliers into consideration. This is not the multinational exercise. This is everybody's exercise. But then what the industry is telling us that we need this high quality primary based data to make decisions. Otherwise, we're lost. And otherwise, we can also not comply with growing regulations like CBAM in Europe that is coming our way very fast. So convergence from global standards and policy bodies, how we come together and not create additional rules, but convene and harmonize what is already existing. The most exciting piece, and with that I will end, is that we already see, because this is already happening, so we have companies using it, 180 corporates with their suppliers, thousands of suppliers, millions of PCFs are being calculated in line with PACT, and they use it for good reasons, to make actual business decisions, which is what excites me the most. So of course we have the given ones, which is how do I make decisions in procurement? But we see a lot of creative things. We see there's a chemical industry that is integrating carbon within their procurement process. So every RFP require a PCF in line with PACT to be submitted with PACT or Together for Sustainability, which is your chemical specific product carbon footprint, and they multiply it by the cost of what the European is putting as the cost of ton, and then adding it to the RFP number. And by that, they're incorporating this into their decision making. And I must say that the one thing that I think is the most exciting one is that they're using product carbon footprint companies to optimize their product portfolios, whether it's to greenify their existing portfolio or to create new green products, new portfolios, and then putting it as a competitive edge. We see companies adopting this, actually putting this as a top line selling point. I have the lowest product carbon footprint in the market. Choose me. That means the market moves. The business side of the house is moving, and not just the sustainability team. That was me. Thank you so much. I'm happy to stay and ask and answer any question that might come from anyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nama. And thank you for being the spark that is lighting up the ecosystem to share more granular data at scale. For those who don't know me, I am João Brits. I'm Director of Growth and Innovation at HowGood. And I'm also a certified carbon accountant. And so I spent most of my workday either talking about product carbon footprints, calculating product carbon footprints, or trying to improve product carbon footprints. So it's a big part of my life. It's also a big part of the life and the focus of the HowGood partners. And one of the things that I think, Nama already kind of, referred to this is like, why do these PCFs matter more than ever before? Now, a lot of you will know that when you look at the corporate carbon footprint of a typical retailer or food manufacturer, typically, 80, sometimes even more than 95% of those corporate emissions come from what's called the scope 3.1, the purchased goods and services. Now, until very recently, these corporate carbon footprints, would be calculated, and the single goal for calculating those corporate carbon footprints was, initially mostly external disclosures. So investors, regulators were asking companies to disclose these emissions, and it didn't really make much difference whether your scope 3 was a little bit higher or 10% lower or 15% higher, because in the end, the disclosure was the goal. Now, what we're hearing a lot from the market is that now disclosure, it doesn't really stop there. We're seeing, as Nama mentioned, there is real customer preference. Here at HowGood, we've seen, based on point of sale data, products that qualify as low carbon products being sold with a 25% uplift. We're seeing, as Nama mentioned, lots of CPG companies actually integrating the need to report PCFs in their RFP processes. But it's not just really about just customer preference. We're seeing companies linking Scope 3 reduction goals to executive compensation. So meeting the Scope 3 goal really kind of, becomes really important for the people who are leading these organizations. We're seeing in some cases also insurance premiums being connected to Scope 3 goals. We're seeing a case across many companies where investors have agreed to provide green bonds, so basically to borrow money and have a cost of capital of that money being conditional on meeting certain Scope 3 goals. So suddenly, the corporate carbon footprint, being able to reduce it, calculating it with precision, is not just meeting a disclosure objective, it's actually directly connected to the business fundamentals, revenues, costs, uncertainty, and differentiators. So, uh, you know, the reasons, the desire for more granular product carbon footprints is great, and there's a big need for it. But at the same time, in practice, this is very difficult to achieve. Here at HowGood, we've been working with hundreds and thousands of brands and calculating more than 4.5 million product carbon footprints, looking at data submitted from suppliers, PCF reports, life cycle assessments. And one of the things that we see across the board is that often these product carbon footprints have misaligned system boundaries. They have misaligned functional units. They use different allocation methodologies. They often only partially available. So most companies are not able to produce great quality PCFs for every single product in their assortment. And so that means that a lot of these companies need to resort to generalized footprints, to spend-based methods, category averages. And then we also see that some of these PCF reports were calculated maybe years ago. Companies invested a lot into calculating those PCFs and life cycle assessments. But then the world in a few years changed so much. They've had to adapt to new sourcing origins. They maybe had to adjust some of their formulations. And these means that these footprints are outdated and cannot be used anymore. And so there's almost kind of these, North Star of like, how do we bridge this old world of PCFs into this new world of PCFs where PCFs are available on demand. They're available portfolio-wide. They're credible and they're specific. They reflect the nature of the product over time, and also every actor and process that was required to create that product. So, how do you know when it's time to scale, right? Like, are you too late? Are you maybe ahead of the game? How do you know that? So here at HowGood, we like to think about, maybe, 4 approaches that we see companies taking to PCFs. The first one is the compliant approach, right? So this is maybe, companies that, their single purpose is to comply, meet the minimum regulatory requirements. If they are forced to report Scope 3 emissions within CSRD, they do so, but they only comply with the letter of the law. Then we have the reactive approach, where a company not only meets these regulatory requirements, but now they start seeing that customers are asking them about these product carbon footprints. And so they kind of need to scramble and be like, okay, how do we calculate this PCF? How do we report to this customer? They have to prioritize and say, okay, this is a big customer, so I'll respond to this one, but these other customers, I'm not going to fulfill their ask. And the purpose here is really to satisfy the customer needs, particularly the needs of the largest customers. Then we see the proactive approach. And this is where we see companies actually seeing, oh, wait a minute, I see a pattern. A lot of customers are starting to ask for this. So is there an opportunity for me to differentiate from the rest of the market, from my peers and competitors, in how I provide product carbon footprints, either in terms of scale or in terms of quality? And so this is what we mean by, differentiation via operational efficiency. These companies invest in systems that calculate product carbon footprints at scale with good quality, and they want to show that they can meet their customer needs better than their peers, and with that, hopefully gain an advantage. And the fourth approach is the strategic one, where here it's not just about, reporting the product carbon footprint of your product, and that's it. But actually, it's about reporting the impact of that product in your customer assortment. So for an ingredient supplier like Ingredion, understanding, for example, what would be the impact on their customer's scope 3 of replacing a given ingredient that they have with an Ingredion's ingredient like a pea protein concentrate, for example. For a food manufacturer, it could be, okay, what would be the impact on the retailer scope 3 emissions of changing their assortment from a specific brand or product category into the types of products that I sell? So you're not just talking about the footprint of the product you sell, you're talking about what that footprint does on your customer's inventory. And that's really where you enable competitive advantage. And we see now more and more companies actually pitching, bringing these carbon footprints into presentations with their customers and saying, alongside cost, alongside taste, which we know will always, these functional attributes, price, they're always going to take, some level of precedence over other criteria. But now we're seeing the sustainability criteria, particularly product carbon footprints, being more and more present and be to untie when a customer is uncertain between similar options. So what are the things that you need to kind of look at as if you're thinking kind of, across that ladder? If you kind of started realizing, some of the signs, that you're getting more requests from customers, that maybe you see an opportunity for differentiation, what are the principles that you can use for scaling? Well, the first one is granularity. So, some companies, for example, would maybe, look at their scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions, divide by the total volume of products that they sell, and say across their portfolio, my product carbon footprint is X on average across the entire portfolio. Now, the issue with this is that it's fairly generic. Companies sell many different products. That's a big generalization. And so the first principle is granularity. Make sure that you're able to calculate PCFs in a way that you can differentiate between product categories, between even products produced in different facilities, and also in a way that enables you to make those comparisons over time. The second one is prioritization. And I think a lot of the retailers that we speak here here at HowGood kind of often they ask me, hey, João, we have both food and non-food, and how do we approach this? And often what we see across many of the retailers is 80 to 90% of their portfolio or in their sales volume comes from the food products. And so that's the place where you probably need to invest the most to footprint. And then on the others, you can still have, good approaches for, product carbon footprinting, but investing in the most material categories, lending the precision power to those categories is going to be really important. The third one is efficiency. Here at HowGood, we've raised, close to $25 million into building the platform and ecosystem that we have today. And the good thing is you don't need to recreate that type of ecosystem from scratch, right? You can build from what already exists and save time in the process. Fourth, credibility. A lot of the PCF engines out there are aligned and claim to be aligned to the GHG protocol, the ISO 14067. Basically, the standards that regulate how product carbon footprints should be calculated. But one thing that you should kind of look into is there's a difference between being aligned versus being third-party verified. And so, in the same way that in many European countries, in order for for a tax and accounting software, you need to use a certified software because that data is really the lifeblood of companies and of reporting to regulatory authorities. Now that the product carbon footprint is in its way to become at par with these types of financial metrics, using the same types of analogy of using certified softwares is really important to make sure that the system is working as it is intended to work. And finally, the global approach. As you know, we live in a world that is strictly interconnected. And being able to have a database that is able to calculate and look at the origins of different ingredients, how they were grown in those regions, is going to be really important. So with that said, typically what we see is, some companies already have a corporate carbon footprint provider, but maybe they haven't taken the step yet to the PCF, the scaling step, right? To be able to, generate PACT conforming PCFs at scale. So we see kind of usually, two approaches that you can take. The first one is speak to your current corporate carbon footprint provider. And of course, the benefit is that you're familiar with them. They're already compatible with your ecosystem. But there's also the risk because some of these softwares have been so much focused on corporate carbon footprint, and the way of thinking and calculating it versus a PCF is so different that you have a risk of non-compliance and accuracy. And on the other hand, you can integrate with a purpose-built PCF provider. And so this basically gives you the benefit of keeping the same corporate carbon footprint provider, but then it's like a module that you add on top of it that allows you to feed their corporate carbon footprint provider with granular PCFs. And the good thing is that this gives you more accuracy, gives you high return on investment, gives you reduced risk, and enables you to kind of still have the familiarity of working with the provider that you've always known. So if you pick this option, what are some of the things that you should look at? First, make sure that they're able to ingest unique emissions factors. Make sure that when you're looking at PCF engines, that they are able to incorporate field level data. A lot of you will know, but particularly within food products, over 80% of the impact often comes from land use change and agricultural practices. And so that ability to reflect accurately those stages is really important for you to have an accurate footprint. Of course, if there is one key takeaway from this presentation and conversation today is compatibility with PACT, CSRD, and that should be really kind of your first question, right? Whether you're looking at a corporate carbon footprint provider or a PCF provider, can you generate PACT conformant PCFs? Because that will really give you the trust that you can understand and read the PCFs from your suppliers and communicate PCFs into your customers with integrity. Fourth, ask explicitly if they have third-party verification on either the product carbon footprints or the methodology. And this will enable you to kind of to discern between the high quality and kind of the lower quality PCF engines. Look at the ability to reflect improvements over time, and not just improvements over time. One of the things that is really important is the ability to discern between what are recalculations. So when there are changes in methodology and the PCF changes as a result, versus real reductions in your emissions. Because not all changes in carbon footprint can be attributed to a reduction. Sometimes it's just a change in data source or methodology. And so the ability for that engine to be able to discern between both is really important so that when you claim reductions, you can actually, stand behind that claim. And of course, a lot of the companies, around the world, particularly in the food system, have very proprietary formulas. And so in order to calculate specific product carbon footprints, we need specific product data. And specific product data is often protected because it is sensitive IP. And so you want to make sure that that PCF engine is also aligned to information security standards. These are some of the standards that HowGood has been using for a while to build our own PCF engine. And we're sharing it with you so that as you kind of explore the broader ecosystem, you can think about some of the key criteria that buyers are looking at. So with that, we brought here, a case study from Brian Nash at Ingredion. We also going to talk, with Grant from a more kind of a retailer perspective. Ingredion, many of you will know, is a large ingredient supplier. And, the challenge that Ingredion was facing was that, they were getting lots of requests for sustainability data from their customers. They were conducting some life cycle assessments, but those life cycle assessments were costing them more than $100,000. And so they wanted, a tool to be able to calculate PCFs at scale. So before, when they would ask a question, it would take them, weeks, months, sometimes to produce some level of reporting. Now with the HowGood system, they can report it in 10 minutes or less. And so it's really like, as you automate a lot of these processes for calculating PCFs, you kind of suddenly open up time and resources for the things that really matter, which, as Nama was mentioning, is actually about driving reductions. It's really about, collaborating with customers and suppliers to do what we're meant to do, which is to decarbonize the supply system. With that said, I'm extremely excited to, of course, introduce you to Grant, who needs no introduction. Grant is the Global VP of Climate and Environment in Ahold Delhaize, one of the world's largest retailers. And one of the things that I'm particularly super inspired about the work that is Ahold Delhaize is doing is just this, like how one of the world's largest retailers, keeps pushing the bar for sustainability, and how these actions that Ahold Delhaize is taking kind of trickle down to the rest of the food system. So Grant, welcome. And I have a couple of questions for you. And I
Yeah,
think the first
maybe.
question,
Sorry, Joe. I have to just jump in straight away. Just thanks for the nice words in the intro. I'm ready to get started on this one. I love the slides that you went through, and I just have to say, Nama, yeah, uh, I'm also excited and passionate about PCF, but in comparison to you, I'm like a sad clown. It's amazing. So sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. Thanks.
no, no, no. Um, well, Grant, first of all, thank you for being
Yeah.
here. We've talked a lot about why, like, kind of the imperative for product carbon footprint. And
Yeah.
I would love to kind of hear from you just a little bit about, like, why did Ahold Delhaize decided to invest in product carbon footprinting? What was the business case?
Yeah. Yeah. Long story here. Long road. I have to be honest here. Um, and it's a long road sprinkled with a healthy dose of good timing and a bit of luck. But there's many things that go into this. And for us, it started with executive education and awareness, not just in product carbon footprint, but the challenge of decarbonization in nature and circularity in health as a total food system challenge. We forced people to have a week together in Cambridge, and that really set the ball rolling. You combine that with a very forward-thinking treasury team, using every sort of sustainability-linked loan vehicle possible to generate capital. That also requires a focus on decarbonization, as you can imagine. We have passionate exco, for example. Our CEO, Franz, he was a co-chair of the Consumer Goods Forum, and just wanting to show off a little bit. I think a little healthy competition is good sometimes as well between peers. You mentioned regulation. as well already. I have to touch on other stakeholders that are critical, like investors, like NGOs who may not always have the nicest things to say about what you're doing, but that public opinion is important, and also peers. So all of that combined said, all right, let's set some very robust targets around decarbonization, but then the business case really for PCF specifically is built off the fact that if you go into our annual report, which I invite everyone to do, and you'll see, our growth, financial growth increasing. You'll see Scope 3 increasing right along with it. We have not decoupled that just yet, and part of that is due to the way that we account, and it has no reflection on the activities that we're doing internally, right? And what PCF does, in my opinion, it enables um, that connection of thousands of emission factors, to product level or ingredient level information in a way where you can include primary activity data if you have it, right? It unlocks what I call accounting ready levers for action, where we can take credit for the work that we in our supply chain are doing, and doing so in a way that our auditors like, and I like that as well.
Thank you, Grant. There's so much to unpack there and so many layers of thinking. Now, as you think about kind of, going into that path of charting PCFs, as we've seen so far, right? A lot of those PCFs come from the products that Ahold buys. Um, and On one hand, you want to have that kind of level of PCF granularity. On the other hand, I also speak to some CPGs. I was just speaking to the chief sustainability officer of a large CPG yesterday, and he had some unease about, oh, like if I report, PCFs for every product, will the retailer, start micromanaging my assortment? Like, how do you think about the engagement with the suppliers? How do you think about like this being an exercise that can benefit you and your suppliers?
Yeah, I recognize that point as well, which is why I think, supplier provision of PCF, this is not a switch that you can turn on overnight. And there's probably different approaches that retailers have to take for own brand product suppliers versus national brand product suppliers. And yeah, I think it's not a simple answer in that we can do everything in the same way right now. I do think that we have to be careful, right? Because I also sympathize with the suppliers, right? Especially suppliers who provide products to multiple retailers, right? There's many usernames and passwords that they have to remember to provide similar information all over the place. And yeah, okay. Like, do I want to introduce yet another one? Not really. Yeah. And if I hold, a mirror up to ourselves, like our current supplier engagement program at Ahold Delhaize is not perfect either. Um, and so I think this is a journey that we have to go on. But there's nothing preventing a retailer starting to ask the questions, do you have a PACT conformant PCF that you want to share? Are you using HowGood already or some other similar tool? Is there a sharing platform that would be better? Is an API a solution, right? Do you have primary data that you want to share? Um, I think we're very far away from using these as a method to micromanage supply chain,
Yeah,
if that answers the question.
for sure. Yeah. And one of the other conversations I had with a CSO of a CPG, I remember she mentioned something like they were constantly being pushed by the board, that you're making all of these investments in sustainability, but I haven't seen those investments translating into wins in market share. How do you think from a retailer perspective into kind of like upholding, potentially products that have lower PCFs, kind of creating that incentive, that business case. How do you think about that?
Mm. Yeah, climate decarbonization, it's one of these topics that I think of my customers, right? Just people who shop in our stores, right? Are any of them like in scale, like really asking for this? No, sorry, like they're not, right? Um, I see this work as business imperative topics. I see this as a way to make sure that we're securing supply for the future. I think this is very much a business resilience topic. You're right. So even if a customer, me as a retailer, if you're a supplier or a customer, a retailer, if they're not asking, like that, I can understand how that may initially feel like it impacts your return on investment, but I invite everyone to think beyond that, and really think of this as a security of supply perspective. Um, uh, because things are shifting, and the solutions that we're talking about to decarbonize also have an impact on adaptation and mitigation as well.
Beautifully said. Um, and one last question before we open for the Q&A, and for our fellow audience members, if you have any questions to Nama and Grant, please make sure to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to cover them. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you've had kind of a very thorough process to select the PCF engine that you ended up working with. Can you share a little bit more about that process, and why did you choose HowGood, and kind of a little bit of like what the process looked like?
Yep, I can. Not a quick process, and the team that was involved at the conclusion of the process was much bigger than the initial team that we started with. So there's a lot of learning for ourselves as we went across this decision making. Um, but just some criteria from my side. I just like 10 things I wanted to share, right? First off, it's whatever your IT people need. Like I don't understand their world. IT, tech, architecture, like yeah, you got to bring these folks, these important, crucial folks to the table straight away and understand their user requirements. Yeah. And we probably underestimated that at the beginning of our project, if I'm honest. Other elements, usability, look and feel. If there's a manual upload experience, what is that like? If there's an integration upload opportunity, what could that look like? How are discrepancies flagged? Because you won't have sourcing locations for every ingredient, and there's some estimations that happen. So how does that correlate, and how are um, the discrepancies prioritized? The ability to scenario plan, saying, all right, this is your assortment now, this is your target in the future. What are the levers of actions that you could potentially pull to get there? That's very important. Also, the ability to incorporate primary data and still maintain that certification at the end. Shareability, compatibility, PACT conformance, very important. An interesting one, thought leadership is really important for me, right? So is a partner like HowGood, right? Are they doing what they need to do to build a community, webinars like this, Region House, for example? I think that's very important. And then the last thing for me is client care, because I need to be taken care of, and that is a critical decision factor for me.
For sure. And I think, for anyone who is at the front lines of changing the food system and decarbonizing the food system, yeah, that caring kind of we kind of all need to care each other, because it's a big battle to fight. Um, I'll pass on, thank you, Grant, for that honest assessment of the front lines of decarbonization. I'll pass on to Eva to take us through the questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you so much, Grant. There is just clearly so many considerations that all of us here on the call have to keep in mind. Lots of good questions coming in. I'm sure many more will pop up. We will do our best to get to as many as we can. And as always, happy to continue the conversation afterwards. I am going to kick us off with a question for Nina. Someone asked about all of the companies in the PACT network, and Nama, feel free to also fill in. Are they compliant with the entire checklist that Joao ran through for sort of considerations for choosing a platform? And I think this also just sort of speaks to the question of how do we go about choosing amidst the larger ecosystem of providers? Nina?
Thanks, Eva. So the way that I like to think about the PACT standard is as it's a data architecture, right? It's ensuring that every time you get or receive a PCF, it looks the same. And so it's interoperable between systems. And as Nama mentioned, it's applied across all sectors and industries. And so there are very specific sort of nuances to the food and ag system that is inherent in the sort of checklist that Joao presented. So I don't think we're saying that every provider that is PACT conformant also meets all of those requirements, which is why it's important to actually vet your providers and your vendors to say, yes, you say that you're PACT conformant or PACT aligned, as Joao mentioned, but it's actually more, there's a second layer of assurances that you should be looking for and seeking from your providers to say, beyond just, can you send and receive the data in this shape? What are the ways that your system handles all of these other additional nuances presented in the food system? Nama, I'll pass to you in case there's additional color you would add there.
No, actually, I support everything you just said. So I want to be also extremely transparent so we have on our website all the PACT conformance solutions available for the audience to see. And what that means, that these solution providers have passed the conformance test of PACT, which is exactly what Nina mentioned. So the PCF is packaged the same way and includes the attributions that PACT methodology asks for, and they can speak to one another between the systems. So this interoperability that we mentioned, every other industry need to look into what is relevant for that specific industry, which probably is very also different from one industry to another, food to chemicals to materials and so on.
Great, thank you so much. And Nama, I'm actually going to stay with you. We had a question about is there sectoral guidance available? So product category rules aligned with PACT for different agricultural commodities. So this is someone who has also looked to the chemical industry and what TFS has done there. Is that a question that you would be able to answer?
I will start and I will pass it to Grant because I think it's a dual answer here. So let me just clarify what is the role of PACT in alignment with industry initiatives. So we, with all humbleness, know that we are not specialized in specific industries. This is not our bread and butter. And every industry knows what they need best. And that's why industry-specific initiative consists of communities of just that industry. Companies are coming together to create their own methodologies. What we see happening in the market, though, in order to make this more, let's say, shorten time to market, reduce cost, and making it align with PACT in the first place, is many of these new methodologies are basically built on PACT. So taking PACT as the base, as your industry agnostic, and just adding on to that layer that is specific to that specific industry. And I also want to clarify, because it didn't come, I think, clearly from any of these discussions, that it doesn't end with the methodology. So in order, again, to enable that scalability, these aligned methodologies are building what we call a data model extension, also on the tech side of the PACT. So it's not just the methodology work, it's also, again, enabled by tech. Now, what is happening in food and ag, I'll pass to Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Nama. This is a real live scenario that's happening now through the Consumer Goods Forum, through some of the many regional PCF implementation working groups, recognizing that, gosh, if we had more clear and concrete and uniform methodology around the creation of PCF for food and ag, that will scale PCF in general, but it will promote consistency and it will help the identification of hotspot areas and ideally drive financing to those areas because it drives accountable, consistent reductions. Yeah, so actually, next week on Monday, some of us here will be at the kickoff of this group, GSTA, that aims to create that common methodology around food and ag in a PAC conformant way that all PCF providers like HowGood can utilize.
Yeah, just imagine where we'll be 1 year from now. Not what you spoke to 3 years ago. On the topic of consistency and interoperability, we had a question come in specific to HowGood, but I think that this is a question for many providers. How does HowGood manage data coming from competitors? We call them colleagues and partners. There's plenty of work to do in the industry. But how does HowGood manage data coming from those folks? Does HowGood send data to other providers? I think this speaks to the sort of larger ecosystems of PCFs being passed, upstream, downstream, et cetera. Nina, I'm going to bring that question to you.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think honestly, this is like a great problem, quote unquote, to have. Oftentimes, and 18 to 24 months ago, we were in a very different position. No one had data to send, right? So getting high quality PCFs from a competitor or another software provider is actually like such an amazing sign of where the market is at. At HowGood, we consider ourselves the great equalizer. So we take in data from all types of providers, all types of sources, and we work hard to scrub it, clean it, harmonize it, standardize it so that it can be used across categories, across different parts of the supply chain. So PACT is actually an incredibly useful structure for that, right? Because we know that we're going to receive it in a very particular way. We know exactly where to look for all of the different variable decisions that a PCF provider can use, right? How are you handling allocation? What is the AR classification? All of those things are very stable in the way that they're represented in the PACT format. So we can take that data in and we'll work to essentially harmonize it and standardize it to the rest of the data pool that you're looking at. And then the other side of the question is like sending data out, right? So we also act as sort of a firewall for our customers. We understand that, as was raised earlier, this stuff is really sensitive information, right? You're not just passing around like your unit size and like your on pack visuals. You're passing around your IP. And so we consider that incredibly serious. And we want to make sure that we're protecting that information as much as possible. And so we are sending, again, PACT PCFs, which include top level outputs and calculations, out to essentially any business system in which the data can become useful, whether it's a carbon accounting platform or your instance of SAP for your procurement teams, right? The data is only worth making if it can find its way to a place where it's actually useful for the business decision makers.
We talk about a world in which everyone has a PCF for all of their products, frankly, coming very soon. And that'll only be useful if you can share it easily. Grant, a number of questions have come in for you that are all sort of within the same theme around how you use PCFs to make decisions on your assortment. So how are PCFs considered in your RFPs? Is there preferential treatment for folks with a lower carbon footprint? If you can speak a little bit about your considerations with regard to PCF results. I think that would be appreciated by many on the call.
Yeah, gosh, and hopefully I'm not going to disappoint everyone who's asked that question because I think really we're maybe a year or two away from really answering that. We are just getting started on our PCF journey. So right now our focus is on how can we use the resulting information that comes out to incentivize our executive community to continue to focus on driving further decarbonization within our supply chain. How we do that, well, this is what we're still working out, but it will be a combination of, let's say, sourcing location or assortment for own brand products, or um, when you're doing R&D, what if you sourced here versus there? I think we have more levers that will pull first on own brand products. But for national brand products, I think this is a conversation that comes later.
I'm happy to build on that from the view of working with a lot of multinational across different industries. And I just want to say, Grant, you guys are not alone, right? So you mentioned the word journey. It is a journey, and it starts with first attaining a high quality data that you trust, and that takes a minute, because we need to get our suppliers on that journey as well. So it's not magic. None of it is magic. I would say that digitizing it and leveraging service providers and solution providers makes it all much easier. It's not even comparable, but it still takes a minute. And we have started implementation for PACT, so real companies adopting and using it and trying to get data from suppliers, let's say 3 years now. And now we see these companies that started back then making those decisions, incorporating everywhere in R&D, in procurement, in sales, in reporting, in strategy, in everywhere. So this is happening, but we're not at the scale we need yet, and that we're going to get, I think, much more rapidly now. So the time will shrink. So it will not take Ahold 3 years now. It will take much less. But I will say that it is an investment, but PACT retention rate is 100%. So there is no one single company that have decided to go into that level of granularity and quality of data that have changed their mind. Because once you go into the light, you don't want to go back into the dark. So that's the number that you cannot disregard.
Thank you so much, Nama. That's the quote of the hour. Joao, I'm going to end with one final question for you. And again, just an invitation to continue the conversation. Many of us will be available for any of your follow-ups. Joao, we have a question around improvement over time. So if you receive a PCF in 2025 and a PCF in 2032, and the emission factor has decreased, does that count as a reduction? This is a question we get so much, and it is a bit in the weeds, but it is so often asked. Joao, maybe you can speak a bit to what that looks like around methodological changes, how to show reductions that have actually happened in your supply chain, and how people can sort of navigate the sort of changing impacts of PCFs over time.
Yeah, and thank you for that question because it really kind of touches to kind of the essence of what we're trying to do. So the important thing is that every time you calculate a PCF over time, that you use a method that allows you to understand what caused the change of the carbon footprint. And you have, in general, two big sets of options. The first one is the underlying activity data has changed. So if you're talking about, farming, maybe there was less reduction of less application of fertilizer, and so that activity data reduced, and that translated into a reduction in the carbon footprint. The other one is not changing activity data, it's changes in the methodology. The change in methodology can happen when, for example, you go from using a secondary data to using supplier-specific data, right? You cannot attribute the fact that you went from secondary data to primary data to reduction because it's a change in the data source, in the methodology. So to Nama's point about us being on this journey, it is really important for us to understand that in the beginning, most of the changes that we will see in the carbon footprint will probably be changes in methodology, increases in granularity, getting more supplier-specific data. And that's beautiful. That's amazing. That's the light that Nama was talking to, because it's from that specificity when we start getting kind of that granular PCF that we can then track the changes in activity data to claim a specific reduction. So yeah, step towards the light and start gathering as granular as you can so that you can make that case over time.
Absolutely. And a topic we could probably fill another hour with. Thank you all so much for being here. You can't talk about product carbon footprinting without talking about supplier engagement. That will be the next webinar that we are looking to in January or February, so keep an eye out. Grant, Nama, thank you so much for being here. So much remarkable content. Thank you all, and happy holidays, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks,
Bye,
all.
everybody.
Amazing. Bye, guys.